Daf Yomi, Tractate Zevachim, page 4. Daf Dalad Amud Aleph, top of the page with the words Binalan, Deva'inan, Zvicha Lishma. Yomar Karaim, Zevach Shlamim Kabano, Shdei Zvicha L'Shem Shlamim. The Gemara asks, where do we derive that we require that an offering's slaughter be performed for its own sake? It is derived from a verse, as the verse states, and if his offering is a sacrifice, a zevach of peace offerings. Leviticus 3:1. Teaching that slaughter must be performed for the sake of a peace offering. The Gemara challenges, but perhaps when the verse states a sacrifice of peace offerings, a sacrifice of peace offerings is simply the name of this type of offering, and is not referring to the intent of the one slaughtering it. Midichtiv hamakriv et dam hashlamim hazorek et dam hashlamim lo kativ zevach yahach kativ zevach shmamina shtei zvicha l'shem shlamim. The Gemara answers, from the fact that it is written in other verses, who offers the blood of the peace offering, Leviticus 7:33, and who sprinkles the blood of the peace offering, Leviticus 7:14. And the term a sacrifice is not written. Whereas here in this verse, the term a sacrifice, zevach, of peace offerings, it is written. To learn from it that the slaughter, zvicha, must be performed for the sake of a peace offering. And the Gemara is not giving up so easily. The Gemara asks back on that. The Gemara asks, Ashkechan zvicha, sharavodot benalan. Okay, we found a source for the halacha that slaughter must be performed for the sake of the offering being sacrificed. But where do we derive that other sacrificial rites, for example, collecting the blood, conveying it to the altar, and sprinkling it on the altar, must also be performed for the sake of the offering? And if you would say, so they're not even allowing them to answer back, they're even preempting, they're cutting them off at their answer, possible answer. And if you would try to answer it and say, let us derive it from the fact that slaughter, that's what I was going to say, just derive it from slaughter, that all of them. Let us derive it from the fact that slaughter must be performed for the sake of the offering, that the other sacrificial rites must be performed for the sake of the offering as well. This derision can be refuted. As slaughter has a unique element of stringency, what is unique about slaughter? It is unique in that, with regard to a paschal offering, the offering is disqualified if it is slaughtered not for the sake of those who eat it. If the paschal offering is slaughtered for the sake of people who are incapable of eating it, such as one who is too ill to eat, it is disqualified. By contrast, performing other rites with this intent does not disqualify the offering. Therefore, one cannot assume that halacha applies to slaughter. Slaughter applies to other rites as well. Ella amar kra hamakriv et dam hashlamim shtehei kabbalah l'shem shlamim. So the Gemara answers, rather, the verse states, who sacrifices the blood of the peace offering. Okay, so we're going to try plan B now. We're going to work it from the blood side. No pun intended. Plan B, blood. The blood of the peace offering, Leviticus 7:33. Referring to the one who collects the blood, and that would apply to all the different rites. Referring to the one who collects the blood of the offering, as the Gemara will explain. This phrase indicates that the collection of the blood must be performed for the sake of the peace offering. The Gemara challenges this, and let the merciful one write this halacha in the Torah only with regard to the collection of the blood, and we would derive it from it that slaughter must also be performed for the sake of the offering. The Gemara answers, because such a derivation can be refuted. Yes, it can be refuted as follows. What is unique about collection of blood? It is unique in that it is not valid if performed by a non-priest or a woman, whereas slaughter can be performed by any competent Jew. Therefore, one cannot assume that a halacha that applies to collection applies to slaughter as well. Ashkachan shchita de kabbalah zrika menala. The Gemara asks, we found a source for the halacha that slaughter and collection of blood must be performed for the sake of the offering. From where do we derive that this halacha applies to the sprinkling of the blood as well. Ma lehani shikein to unot zafon v'yeshnon b'chataot hapnimiyot. And if you would say, let us derive from these rites, meaning slaughter and collection, that this halakha applies, to the sprinkling of the blood as well. This derivation can be refuted. What is unique about these rites? They are unique in that for offerings of the most sacred order, it is required that they be performed in the north of the temple courtyard. And furthermore, these rites are performed in the sacrifice of the inner sin offerings as well as standard sin offerings. The sprinkling of the blood on the external altar, by contrast, is performed in all portions of the temple courtyard, and it is not performed in the sacrifice of inner sin offerings, whose blood is sprinkled only in the sanctuary. In the sanctuary, Ela Amar Krazorek et Dam Shlamim. Shetehei Zrika L'Shem Shlamim. The Gemara answers, rather the verse states, who sprinkles the blood of the peace offering. Leviticus 7:14, indicating that the sprinkling of the blood must be performed for the sake of a peace offering. The Gemara challenges, let the merciful one write this halakha all in regard to sprinkling, and we would derive from it that it applies to slaughter and collection as well. The Gemara answers that would not be sufficient because such a derivation can be refuted, as sprinkling has a unique element of stringency. What is unique about sprinkling? It is unique in that a non-priest is liable to be punished with death at the hand of heaven for performing ashkachan kuluhu holacha minaman. The Gemara asks, we found this source for this halakha with regard to all four rites, save conveying the blood to the altar. Holacha is bringing it, walking it over, bringing it over. From where do we derive that this latter rite must also be performed for the sake of the offering? And if you would say, let us derive from all the other rites that conveying the blood must also be performed for the sake of the offering, this derivation can also be refuted. What is unique about all of the other rites? They are unique in that each of them is an indispensable rite. Would you say that any requirement that applies to those rites necessarily applies also with regard to conveying the blood, which is dispensable? If an offering is slaughtered by the side of the altar, it is unnecessary to convey its blood to the altar. ותניא והקריבו זו קבלת הדם והפג רחמנה בלשון הולכה לממורה דהולכה לא תפקע מכלל קבלה. And the Gemara answers, rather the verse states, and the priest shall sacrifice the whole and make its smoke upon the altar. Leviticus 1:13. And the master said that this is referring to conveying the limbs of the offering to the ramp of the altar. And it is taught in a Braita with regard to the verse, and Aaron's sons, the priests, shall present the blood. Leviticus 1:5. That this is referring to the collection of the blood. And one can infer that the merciful one expresses collection of the blood in the same language used for conveying. To say, that you should not exclude conveying from the category of collection of blood. Therefore, the halachot of collection apply to conveying. The Gemara asks further, and we found a source for the halacha concerning deviation with regard to the type of offering, meaning that an offering may not be slaughtered for the sake of a different type of offering. From where do we derive the halacha concerning deviation with regard to the owner, that an offering may not be slaughtered for the sake of one who is not the owner? Amarat Pinchas de Bered Ravami Amakro Amakro Ay 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 ay. Okay, where are we? Amarat Pinchas de Bered Ravami Amakro Sar Zevach Todat Shilama Shitehez Vichal Todat אם אינו עניין לשינוי קודש, תנפקלן מאדם. תנאו עניין לשינוי בעלים. Rav Pinchas, son of Rabbi Ami, says, the verse states, with regard to a thanks offering, and the meat of the sacrifice, zevah, of his thanksgiving peace offering, shall be eaten on the day of his offering, Leviticus 7:15, apparently indicating that its slaughter, Zevachim, must be performed for the sake of a thanks offering. And if this language is not needed for the matter of deviation with regard to the type of offering, and in fact it is not, as we already derived this halacha from there. Meaning, the verse cited concerning peace offerings apply it to the matter of deviation with regard to the owner. It is thereby derived that an offering must be slaughtered for the sake of its owner. Abba Chanin Omer Mishum Rabbi Eliezer Ba Lilamed Toda Shishachta L'Shem Shlamim Kshira Shlamim Shishachta L'Shem Toda B'Zula Ma Hafresh Ben Ze L'Ze Toda Kruya Shlamim Ve'en Shlamim Kruyim Toda. The Gemara asks, but does this verse come to teach this halacha? Isn't it necessary for that which is taught in Paraita concerning the phrase "and the meat of the sacrifice of his thanksgiving peace offering"? Rabbi Chanin says, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, it comes to teach that a thanks offering that one slaughtered for the sake of a peace offering is fit, whereas a peace offering that one slaughtered for the sake of a thanks offering is unfit. Why? What is the difference between this offering and that offering? A thanks offering is called a peace offering in that verse, but a peace offering is not called a thanks offering. Okay, now it makes sense. The Gemara answers, we are saying that it is derived from the superfluous term sacrifice, that the slaughter must be performed for the sake of the owner. The term peace offering teaches Abba Chanin's rule. The Gemara disputes this, but the term sacrifice, zevach, is still necessary to serve as the source for another halachic midrash. From where is it derived that the meat of a sin offering and a guilt offering may be eaten only on the day the animal is sacrificed and the following night, like a thanks offering? The verse states, and the meat of the sacrifice of his thanksgiving peace offering shall be eaten on the day of his offering. The phrase teaches that not only thanks offerings, but any slaughtered offering is subject to this time limit unless the Torah specifies otherwise. Imkain, Nichtov Rav Chumana Ubesar Todah Shlama My Zevach Shmamina Tarati. The Gemara answers, if that were so, meaning if the term sacrifice indicated only that a sin offering and a guilt offering may be eaten only for the period of time for which a thanks offering may be eaten, let the verse write, and meat of his Thanksgiving peace offering sacrifice. What is indicated by the mention of the word sacrifice before the phrase Thanksgiving peace offering? Rather, conclude two conclusions from it. The Gemara asks, we found a source for the halakha that slaughters must be performed for the sake of the owner. From where do we derive that other sacrificial rites must also be performed for the sake of the owner? And if you would say, let us derive from slaughter that the other rites must be performed for the sake of the owner as well, this derivation can be refuted. What is unique about slaughter? It is unique in that, with regard to a paschal offering, slaughter, not for the sake of those who eat it, disqualifies the offering, whereas performing the other rites, not for the sake of the owner, does not. The Gemara answers the term of slaughter is stated with regard to deviation from the type of offering, and a term of slaughter is stated with regard to deviation with regard to the owner. Just as concerning the term slaughter, stated with regard to deviation from the type of offering, you did not differentiate between slaughter and the other sacrificial rites, and all four rites must be performed for the sake of the offering. So too, concerning the term slaughter, stated with regard to deviation in the context of the owner, you should not differentiate between slaughter and the other sacrificial rites. She came to Sobe Gufa, Vieshno Avodas. Vieshno, Lachar Misa, Vieshno, Betzivu, Kivayachi. Gemara counters this derivation can be refuted. What is unique about derivation from the type of offering as opposed to deviation with regard to the owner? It is unique with regard to our four matters. First, it is unique in that its disqualification concerns the essence of the offering itself. And second, it is unique in that deviation from the type of offering applies to four sacrificial rites, whereas performing a rite for the sake of the owner is relevant only to the sprinkling of the blood, which atones for its owner. And third, it is unique in that division from the type of offering applies even after the death of the owner, when the owner's heir brings the offering, whereas intent for the sake of the owner is irrelevant. The owner is irrelevant after the owner has died. And fourth, it is unique in that deviation from the type of offering. The type of offering applies with regard to communal offerings as well as the regard to individual offerings, whereas employing the term owner is irrelevant with regard to communal offerings, which are owned by the public. Okay, let's stop here, and we're going to turn to B, God willing, soon. Let's break. Weiter. 4B, top of the page. The words the afal gav, the talti lav dafke, talti miha dafke. And although two of these distinctions are not precise, the other two are in any event precise distinctions, based upon which a distinction can be drawn. Ma'ishna shinui ba'alim. Dilo havisul begufo machshava be'almo. Shinu kodesh nami machshava be'almo. Elo kevan de'achshava pasela. Hachanami kevan de'achshava pasela. The Gemara explains why two of the distinctions are not precise. What is different about deviation with regard to the owner, such that its disqualification does not concern the offering itself? It is that this merely constitutes a change of thought. Deviation from the type of offering is also merely a change of thought. The offering is not physically affected. Rather, this distinction between deviation with regard to the owner and deviation from the type of offering is false. One should claim that if deviation from the type of offering disqualifies it, once the one who slaughtered it had that intent. Here too, once the one who slaughtered it had intent to deviate from its owner, he disqualified it. Ulerav Pinchas Rav Mari. Wasn't this Pinchas Bridge of Army? It's interesting. I wonder if that's a mistake, because above they said Pinchas Breder of Ami. And the meat of the sacrifice. Okay, let's see here. And then they say here, Ulav Pinchas Breder of Mari, Damayesh Shinoi Badim Lachamisa, Tarti Miha, The Gemara explains the difficulty with the second distinction, the case where the owner died, and according to Rav Pinchas, the son of Rav Mari, maybe they're two different people, who says that disqualification by deviation with regard to the owner applies even after the owner's death. There is no distinction in this regard between deviation from the type of offering and deviation with regard to the owner. In any event, there are two remaining distinctions based on which the comparison between a deviation from the type of offering and a deviation with regard to the owner can be refuted. Rather, Ravashi says that the halacha that it is prohibited to sprinkle the blood for the sake of one other than the owner is derived from a verse. The verse states, "And it shall be accepted for him to atone for him," Leviticus 1:4, teaching that the sacrificial rite that atones for the owner, namely the sprinkling of the blood, must be performed specifically for him and not for another. Rabbi Shimon Omer, את שעליו חייב באחריותו, את שאינו עליו אינו חייב באחריותו. The Gemara asks, but does this verse come to teach this halakha? Isn't it necessary for that which is taught in a Braita with regard to the verse, and it shall be accepted for him to atone for him? Rabbi Shimon says this indicates that in a case where one consecrated an animal as an offering and it died or was lost, if it was initially incumbent upon him to bring an offering, meaning if he had accepted upon himself a personal obligation to bring an offering, he bears responsibility for it. Meaning, he is obligated to bring another offering in its stead. But if it was not incumbent upon him to bring an offering, meaning if he consecrated a specific animal without accepting upon himself any personal obligation, he does not bear responsibility for it if it dies or is lost. Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi, my time. Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi, my time. Die. Wow, this is a big daf. Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi. Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi. Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Avdim, my time of Keva, Damar Alai, command Taun le Akape Dami. Rav Yitzchak bar Avdim says, what is the reasoning behind this distinction? Once a person said, it is incumbent upon me to bring an offering, it is considered as though the offering is loaded upon his shoulders. Okay. He does not discharge his obligation until he brings some offering. Ravashi mi v'nirtza lo lechaper kama. The Gemara answers, Ravashi says that the halacha that it is prohibited to sprinkle the blood for the sake of one other than the owner is derived from the phrase, and it shall be accepted for him not from the term for him, on which the Braita is based. The Gemara asks, we found a source for the halacha slaughter and the sprinkling of the blood must be performed for the sake of the owner. From where do we derive that the collection of the blood must also be performed for the sake of the owner? And if you would say that it's derived from slaughter and sprinkling, that collection must also be performed for the sake of the owner. This derivation can be refuted. What is unique about slaughter and sprinkling? They are unique in that each is a right for which one is liable to be punished with death at the hand of heaven if he performs it outside the temple. Ela Amar Rav Ashi Atya Me'er Nazir Dichtiv Et ha'el yaseh zevach shlamim sheteh asiyeto l'shem shlamim Tivenu inyan l'shinui kodesh Tidafka le'v'hasam Teneyo inyan l'shinui ba'alim. Rather, Rav Ashi says that the halacha that the collection of the blood must also be performed for the sake of the owner is derived from the case of an Nazarite ram. As it is written, and he shall offer the ram for a sacrifice of peace, offerings unto the Lord. Numbers 6:17, indicating that its offering should be performed for the sake of a peace offering. And if the verse is not necessary for the matter of deviation from the type of offering, as we derive that from there, meaning the verses cited earlier in 4a apply it to the matter of deviation with regard to the owner. It is thereby derived that his sacrificial rites must be performed for the sake of his owner. Amar Rav Acha bar Rav Abba leRove, Em yaseh klal, zevach prat klal uprat, ein bechlal ela ma shebeprat, zvicha in midei achrina la. Rav Acha bar Abba said to Rava in an objection to this derivation, say the term shall offer is a generalization, and a sacrifice is a detail. According to the principles of biblical hermeneutics, where there is a generalization and a detail, the generalization includes only that which is specified in the detail, and nothing else. Accordingly, the slaughter of Zevicha, yes, must be performed for the sake of the owner, but no other rite must be performed for the sake of the owner in order for the offering to be fit. Ikativ yaseh shlamim zevach, ki dika'amr tash liktiv yaseh zevach shlamim, havarei klal she'eno maleh. B'chol klal she'eno maleh, en danin oto b'chlal prat. The Gemara answers, if it had been written, shall offer the ram for peace offerings as a sacrifice, it would be, as you say. The clause, shall offer the ram for peace offerings, would be considered a generalization, and sacrifice would be a detail. Now that it is written, shall offer the ram for a sacrifice of peace offerings, the term shall offer is an incomplete generalization, as the term for a sacrifice interrupts between shall offer and peace offerings, and one cannot derive a halacha from any incomplete generalization by employing the principle of a generalization and a detail. Ravina says there's a different answer. Actually, one can derive a halacha from verses with incomplete generalizations, using the principle of a generalization and a detail. And the reason this halacha applies to other rites besides slaughter is that by adding the term unto the Lord, it then makes it a generalization. ברבי עשיות ותו לא, כללה בתרה, כל, אפילו שפיכת שיריים בהקטרת הימורים. התנא דרבי ישמעאל בכללי הופעתי, תרש כי הגבנה. Before Ravina concluded his interpretation, Rav Difti said to Ravina, but the former generalization is similar to the latter generalization. The former generalization includes only the essential sacrificial actions and nothing more, whereas the latter generalization includes any sacrificial duty unto the Lord, and even pouring the remains of the blood on the base of the altar, and burning the sacrificial portions of the offering of the altar on the altar. Ravina responded, the school of Rabbi Shmuel taught generalizations and details in cases like this. Klal uprat uklal, iyata dan ela ke'en aprat. Ma haprat miforash, avoda be'enan lishman, af kol avoda uve'enan lishman. Ravina concludes his explanation, since the term unto the Lord is an generalization. The verse is formulated as a generalization and the detail and a generalization, and you may deduce that the verse is referring only to items similar to the detail, just as the mentioned detail, slaughter, is defined as an essential right, and we require that it be performed for the sake of the owner. So too, we require that every essential right be performed for the sake of the owner. Ima ha'prav miforash avodah. Ima ha'prav miforash avodah חייבים עליה בחוץ. אף כל הבוילים חייבים עליה בחוץ. שחיטה וזריקה אין. כבב הלך עליו. The Gemara asks if the verse is referring only to actions similar to the detail. Not all of the essential rights are necessarily included. Perhaps it should be derived that just as the mentioned detail, slaughter, is defined as an essential right, and one is liable to be punished with death at the hand of heaven for performing it outside the temple, so to any essential right for which one is liable to be punished with death at the hand of heaven for performing it outside the temple is included in the verse. Accordingly, slaughter and sprinkling the blood are included, but collection of blood and conveying it are not. Inamima prad nefash davar taun tzafon yeshnu mechataot hapnimiyot av kol taun tzafon yeshnu mechataot hapnimiyot shchita v'kabalayin zrika la. Alternatively, it could be derived that just as the item mentioned in the detail is clearly defined as an action that requires performance in the north of the temple courtyard and is performed in the sacrifice of inner sin offerings, so too, any right that requires performance in the north and is performed in the sacrifice of inner sin offerings is included in the halacha. Accordingly, slaughter and collection are included. Sprinkling the blood is not. Ikra bema. Hacha ve'ika. Hachi ve'ika. Lemema. Hachi. Shikulim hen. V'yavo shnehem. Mishanachina. V'chada. Chada teku. B'milsa. I wonder if this is a teku or not. Is this a teku? Chada v'chada teku b'milsa. Is this a teku? I gotta check this one out. This is interesting. Chada v'chada teku b'milsa. The Gemara, both possibilities are equally valid. This derivation can be said, and that derivation can be said. Either collection of sprinkling of blood might be included in the halacha. Either collection or sprinkling might be included in the halacha. Consequently, they are equal, and therefore both are included. Or, according to another version of the Gemara's answer, they are equal, and therefore each one, both collection and sprinkling, shall stand in its status. Teku b'milsa. I've never seen a teku used that way before. Okay. Ibayasei mezrika. Midrashi nafka. The Gemara provides an alternative answer. If you wish, say that Sprinkling is derived from the verse that Ravashi cited, and it shall be accepted for him to atone for him. Therefore, when the verse states, and he shall offer the ram for a sacrifice of peace offerings to the Lord, indicating the inclusion of rites similar to slaughter, it is apparently referring not to sprinkling but to collection. The Gemara asks, we found the source for the halacha that a Nazarite's ram must be sacrificed for the sake of its owner. From where do we derive that this halacha applies with regard to offer peace offerings as well? And if you would say, let us derive from a Nazarite's ram that all peace offerings must be sacrificed for the sake of their owners, this derivation can be refuted. What is unique about a Nazarite's ram? It is unique in that there is other blood, meaning there are other offerings, a sin offering and a burnt offering, that must be brought by a Nazarite together with his ram. The Gemara answers, if so, if this halakha is unique to a Nazarite's ram, let the verse write his peace offerings. What is indicated by writing peace offerings in general is written to include all types of peace offerings. The Gemara asks, we found a source for the halacha that a peace offering must be sacrificed for its own sake and for the sake of its owner. From where do we derive that this halacha applies with regard to all other offerings? And if you would say, let us derive it from peace offering, that all offerings must be sacrificed with these intentions, this derivation can be refuted. What is unique about a peace offering? It is unique in that it requires placing hands on the head of the offering, and it is accompanied by libations, and it requires the waving of the breast and the right hind leg by the priest and owner together. No other offering possesses all three of these requirements. הקישן הכתוב של שלמים. מה שלמים בין שינוי קודש בין שינוי בעלים בעינן שלושמה, אף כל בין שינוי קודש ובין שינוי בעלים בעינן ishma. The Gemara answers, rather, the verse states, this is the law of the burnt offering, of the meal offering, and of the sin offering, and of the guilt offering, and of the consecration offering, and of the sacrifice of peace offerings. Leviticus 7:37. The verse juxtaposes all types of offerings with peace offerings, indicating that justice requires sacrifice of a peace offering to be performed for its sake, both concerning deviation from the type of offering and concerning deviation with regard to the owner. So too we require the sacrifice of every type of offering to be performed for its sake, both concerning deviation from the type of offering and concerning deviation with regard to the owner. Having established the source for the requirements of sacrifice offerings with the rightful owner and the specific type of offering in mind, the Gemara inquires, why not say that in the case where one slaughtered them not for their own sake, they are disqualified? Why, according to the Mishnah, do they remain fit? Amar Kra Motza Sifatecha Tishmor Vasita Kasher Nedarta. The Gemara Hainedava Nederhu Eva Imkama Shinedarta Asita Yehi Neder Vimlav Yehi Nedava. The Gemara answers, the verse states, that which has gone out of your lips you shall observe and do according to what you have vowed freely to the Lord your God, that which you have promised with your mouth. Deuteronomy 23:24. The Gemara interprets the words Nidarta and Nidava exegetically. How can the offering mentioned in this verse be a gift offering? How can it be a gift offering? It is already referred to as a vow offering. Rather, the verse indicates that if you did what you had vowed to do, meaning sacrificed your vow offering properly, it should be a satisfactory vow offering. But if you did not sacrifice it properly, it shall be rendered a voluntary gift offering. Although it does not satisfy the obligation of your vow, it remains a valid offering. And it was necessary for the Torah to include the verse, that which has gone out of your lips, and it was necessary to include the verse, this is the law, as had the merciful one written in the Torah only the verse, that which has gone out of your lips. I would say, and we'll stop here for today.